Every time a war begins, the world doesn't just lose lives, it loses trillions of dollars. Prices rise, economies slow down, and silently, your money starts losing value. But here's the shocking truth. Wars don't just destroy nations, they quietly destroy the global economy, and you're already paying the price.
War is often shown as a battle of weapons, territory, and power. But behind the explosions and headlines, something far more dangerous is unfolding. A silent economic shockwave that spreads across the entire world. When a war begins, governments instantly shift their priorities. Budgets that were once allocated to healthcare, education, infrastructure, and public welfare are suddenly redirected toward military spending. This is not a small shift. In many cases, countries increase their defense budgets by hundreds of billions of dollars within months. But where does this money come from? Governments typically have three options: raise taxes, borrow money, or print more currency. And most of the time, they do all three. Raising taxes puts immediate pressure on citizens and businesses. People have less disposable income, and companies reduce investments. Economic growth begins to slow down. Borrowing money increases national debt. Countries start taking massive loans from international institutions or issue government bonds. While this may seem like a temporary solution, it creates long-term financial pressure that can last decades. But the most dangerous option is printing money. When governments print more money to fund war expenses, the supply of money increases without a matching increase in goods and services. This leads to inflation, the gradual rise in prices across the economy. At first, inflation might seem manageable, but over time, it becomes a serious problem. The cost of everyday essentials like food, fuel, and housing begins to rise. And the worst part? Wages often don't increase at the same pace. This means people are effectively becoming poorer without realizing it. Now here's where it gets even more complex. War doesn't just affect the country involved. It disrupts the global economy. In today's interconnected world, no country operates in isolation. Supply chains stretch across continents. Raw materials are sourced globally. Products are manufactured in multiple countries before reaching consumers. When war disrupts one part of this system, the entire chain is affected. For example, if a country that produces key resources like oil, gas, wheat, or metals enters a conflict, global supply immediately shrinks. And when supply decreases while demand remains the same, prices go up. This is why a war happening thousands of miles away can suddenly make your groceries more expensive. Investors also react quickly to war. Financial markets hate uncertainty. As soon as conflict begins, stock markets often become volatile. Investors pull money out of risky assets and move towards safer options like gold or government bonds. This shift can cause stock prices to drop, affecting retirement funds, savings, and investments of ordinary people. Businesses also become cautious. Companies delay expansion plans, reduce hiring, and cut costs to prepare for uncertainty. This slows down economic activity even further. Another hidden impact is currency instability. Countries involved in war often see their currencies weaken. A weaker currency makes imports more expensive, which adds to inflation. At the same time, global trade patterns start shifting. Countries impose sanctions, restrict exports, or change alliances. Trade routes become longer, slower, and more expensive. All of this adds friction to the global economy. So while the world focuses on the visible destruction caused by war, the invisible damage is spreading silently through financial systems, markets, and everyday life. And this is just the beginning. Because what happens next affects you even more directly. War might feel like something distant, something happening on news channels or in faraway countries. But economically, war has a way of reaching into your daily life, quietly and consistently. Let's start with the most obvious impact: prices. One of the first things that happens during war is a spike in energy prices. Oil and gas are the backbone of modern economies. They power transportation, manufacturing, electricity, and even agriculture. When war disrupts oil supply, whether through damaged infrastructure, sanctions, or restricted trade, global prices rise almost instantly. And when fuel becomes expensive, everything becomes expensive. Transportation costs increase. Shipping goods across countries becomes more costly. Factories pay more for energy. Farmers pay more for fuel to operate machinery. These increased costs don't disappear. They are passed on to consumers. That's why your grocery bill starts going up. Food is particularly sensitive to war. Many countries depend on imports for essential commodities like wheat, corn, and fertilizers. If major producers are involved in conflict, global supply drops. At the same time, transportation disruptions make it harder to move food across borders. This creates shortages in some regions and price spikes in others. Even something as simple as bread can become more expensive due to a war happening thousands of miles away. Now let's talk about jobs. War creates uncertainty, and uncertainty is bad for business. Companies don't like unpredictable environments. They become cautious. Instead of expanding, they focus on survival. Hiring slows down. In some cases, layoffs begin. Industries that depend on global trade, like manufacturing, logistics, and retail, are hit especially hard. Small businesses suffer the most. Rising costs, reduced demand, and economic instability make it difficult for them to survive. At the same time, inflation reduces purchasing power. People spend less. This further slows down economic activity. It becomes a cycle. Higher prices, lower spending, slower business growth, job losses, even lower spending. Now here's something many people don't realize. Interest rates. To control inflation caused by war-related spending, central banks often increase interest rates. This makes borrowing more expensive. Loans, mortgages, credit cards, everything becomes costlier. If you're planning to buy a house, start a business, or even finance education, you end up paying more. Savings also lose value during inflation. Even if your bank balance stays the same, what that money can buy decreases over time. So in reality, you are losing money without spending it. Another hidden impact is on investments. Stock markets react strongly to war. Prices fluctuate rapidly. Retirement accounts, mutual funds, and personal investments can lose value. Even if markets recover later, the short-term losses can be significant. Psychologically, this creates fear. People stop investing, stop spending, and start saving excessively. While this may seem like a safe strategy, it slows down economic growth even further. And then there's government policy. To manage war expenses and economic instability, governments may introduce new taxes, reduce subsidies, or cut public spending in other areas. This means fewer benefits, higher costs, and reduced support for citizens. So while war may appear distant, its economic effects are deeply personal. It affects what you pay, what you earn, what you save, and what you can afford in the future. But here's the most controversial part of all. Not everyone loses during war. Some actually win. War is often described as a tragedy. And for most people, it is lives are lost, economies suffer, and uncertainty spreads across the world. But economically, war is not equal for everyone. While millions struggle with rising costs and instability, certain industries experience massive growth. Defense companies are the biggest beneficiaries. When governments increase military spending, they purchase weapons, equipment, technology, and services from private contractors. These contracts are often worth billions of dollars. As a result, defense companies see huge increases in revenue and stock prices. Investors who hold shares in these companies can make significant profits during wartime. Energy companies also benefit. When oil and gas prices rise due to supply disruptions, companies that produce and sell energy earn higher profits. Even if production remains the same, higher prices mean more revenue. This creates a situation where crisis for many becomes opportunity for a few. Commodity traders also gain. They speculate on price movements in oil, metals, and agricultural products. Volatility creates chances for profit. But while these sectors grow, the broader economy suffers. Now let's talk about the long-term consequences. War doesn't end when the fighting stops. The economic damage continues for years, sometimes decades. Countries involved in war are often left with massive debt. Rebuilding infrastructure requires huge investments. Roads, bridges, hospitals, schools, everything needs to be rebuilt. This puts additional pressure on government finances. Inflation can persist even after the war ends. Economic recovery is slow and uneven. Some sectors recover quickly, while others take years. Global trade patterns may permanently change. Countries form new alliances, shift supply chains, and reduce dependence on certain regions. While this can create new opportunities, it also leads to inefficiencies and higher costs. Another long-term impact is trust. Investors and businesses become cautious about regions affected by war. Foreign investment declines. Economic growth slows down. For individuals, the long-term effects can be life-changing. Savings may have lost value, job opportunities may have decreased, cost of living may remain high, and perhaps the most important impact is psychological. War creates uncertainty, and uncertainty changes behavior. People become more risk-averse, they save more and spend less. While this may seem like a rational response, it reduces overall economic activity. Governments also become more focused on security and defense, often at the expense of social development. This shifts priorities for years to come. So when we look at war, we need to look beyond the battlefield. Because the real damage is not just physical, it is economic, systemic, and long-lasting. War reshapes economies, redistributes wealth, and changes the financial future of millions of people. And the most surprising part? You don't have to be in a war zone to feel its effects. Because in a globalized world, when one region burns, the entire economy feels the heat. If you want to understand how global events affect your money, subscribe for more deep economic breakdowns.